So much for tuning in. We've been away for quite a while. The studio was not renovated, but the rest of the offices here at the Comcast studio, they have been recarpeted. You've got a new lobby, and it really looks very good.
And it smells good.
And it smells good.
The only thing that we don't have yet here is the audience sittings for participation. So,
right, but when all the construction's done, anytime you'd like to come in and watch the show live, do feel free to come on down and be in the audience. So we've got a few current events maybe to talk about.
Well, I know that you went to the council meeting last Monday, and you spoke. I'm not sure whether it was for or against the budget, or were you for the council or against the council, or were you for the department or against the department? In any case, I read the news from the Norwich Bulletin that the cut is just too steep accordingly. So I'm sure that a lot of people are a little bit concerned as to what might be cut as far as our services would be.
Well, the budget, it was actually a resolution by, I believe, the Republican members of the City Council that was being discussed. They had a fairly long, I think it was over 2 hours, of citizen comments concerning that resolution. The resolution, to me, I did go to speak on it, because what was being cut were affecting the health, welfare, and safety of the citizens in Norwich, and I think that's a very dangerous thing to do.
Is that every citizen across the scale, or is that just
for the safety?
Few, right? Of course, for the safety, if you cut off the fire
services,
then of course everybody is into that.
Right, but what was being cut were one battalion chief and a fireman.
Yes.
And I think that's a very dangerous thing to do.
Well, it's probably the same thing as if they say, well, we're going to cut back on our police force.
They were not going to replace a police car.
Yes.
So I think that, it's a... they were also bringing the social service department down to one social worker. For 40,000 people, that's a dramatic burden placed on, how often we've used the social service department.
And there's a lot of need for that, and obviously when you start cutting the budget, it's always the poor and the elderly and the children.
Well, let's take the children. 700 and I forgot, $720,000 again,
and
off the education budget.
And of course the schools and so on, of course.
Right.
That's going to be... Well, in any case, I'm sure that for 2 hours the citizen may have expressed their opinions.
Well, let me tell you what else they were cutting. We have the Otis Library just received a national award. I mean, of all of the libraries in the entire country, to get a national award for the services that our library does.
And we have to congratulate Bob Farwell.
Yes, Bob Farwell and the board of Otis.
Yes,
the board of the library,
they've been very
the staff.
Active. Yes,
they're incredible.
And when we have our grandson here in Norwich at that time, we really appreciate having to take him to the Otis Library.
That's right.
And it was just a wonderful place to be in.
I don't know, because our grandson was born here in Norwich,
right?
And for the first 3 years of his life, he spent here in Norwich. And all of the programs that they have for children are incredible. They're wonderful programs.
And I think the more we need this, because we now have such diversity of kids, that having this services available to these kids would probably be the price of admission for the future of Norwich. And you see, these kids, if you want them to integrate, then they come into the library, they see other kids around, and hey, they look a little bit different, but we're all the same. And that probably is what their introduction is. Rather than have them come in high school and they've never integrated themselves. They've never worked and so on like that. And when they come to a high school like that, they kind of go along the group mentality. And so, but I would say that when they're still very young, and I think that is how we should address this issue of, well, how do you integrate a lot of children coming from different parts of the world? And, well, Norwich, of course, being very close to the casino, will have a lot of children coming from different workers coming from the casino. And it is, I think, our responsibility to see that their family as well as their children are educated and as well as integrated.
Right. But we also have, there are so many needs that are unmet in this community.
Oh, yes.
That I understand the political situation. I mean, you have new council members that made big promises about, we're going to cut your taxes for you. And people aren't thinking, where are those cuts coming from? One of the things that I did when I looked over the budget was I found, because we have an incredible resource, and again, it's probably one of the reasons why many people would move to companies would move to Norwich, and that's because we own our own municipal utilities. Part of owning that utility is that we are getting 10% of their gross revenue every year that goes to our budget. When I looked at the budget, and public utilities had made $97 million, $97+ million this past year, and we had received $8 million plus in as our share.
Yeah, but that's 10% money.
10% would have been $9 million plus then. So when I saw there was a difference of like $1,095,000, I questioned that, and I also realized that no one has sat down with the public utilities since 1965, the council has not, to determine if maybe at this point, when situations have changed drastically, that maybe there should be an adjustment in what the city actually receives from its municipal utility.
It should have been adjusted every so many years because of the cost of living and so on. And yeah, it might be this good, I would say,
starting
contribution
point, yeah.
In 1965, 10% is not bad at the time. Today, it may not be that great.
Right, because in 1965, we had a very healthy economy, basically, in Norwich. I mean, it wasn't, it was maybe 20, 30 years ago that the average income in Norwich was $80,000, $90,000. Today, it is substantially less than that. We're down to around, I forgot what the figure is, but it's about 40,000.
It's one place, or it's one area that someone has to look into.
To look at.
Very, very closely.
But I
and
did,
find out. And,
one of the
our city
councilmen...
attorney should be able to kind of
No, it's the council members that really have to be looking at that. When they're looking at doing cuts and they can quickly, they have to do a little bit more work than that, Ben. I mean, it didn't take me, I looked at over everything over the weekend to write something. And that kind of stares out at you when you see that's not 10%. But one of the council members did call me. I really do thank Councilman Tucker Braddock, because he did call me today. He may have been the only one that actually took one of the sheets that I left that identified where I found monies that would not cut health, safety, or welfare, because when I looked through it, I'll go over the other things, but with the Department of Public Utilities, Tucker went and he spoke with John Bilda, and John explained to him that the sewer is not considered part of the utilities. It is not they don't share the proceeds of that revenue That's not considered
So
part.
they're carving it out and saying, no, you're not going to get your 10%
Well,
out of the sewer. But we pay sewer fees
Yes.
on every houses in
Absolutely.
Norwich
Absolutely.
to the public utilities.
Well, I do not remember seeing the sewer being excluded from that 10%. But I'm going to go back. I'll look at the charter because Tucker is going to, he said John Builder would like to, sit down and talk with me. And I said that would be great, but I'm not the one that's on the council making cuts,
Yeah.
and it would be the council that really should have this information.
They should
So
know.
Tucker's going to go with me as a council member so he can bring the information back. Because when I asked Tucker particular questions, excuse me, they apparently weren't the same questions that Tucker had asked John, and Tucker felt maybe I should be the one talking to John. So we're going to go together and because this isn't any kind of an attack on Norwich Public Utilities. I am their biggest fan. I mean, if there are two things in this community that I think are real assets to any business that wants to come to Norwich, our public utilities and NFA are two of the things that I do believe very strongly are reasons why businesses could move here. However, that doesn't mean that, those are the politically elite and untouchable, especially when you're faced with the kinds of tax burden that the people in Norwich are faced with right now. So
I'm sure
I think
that-
it should be looked at, that's
Of
all.
course. And I'm sure that they're probably going to also look at the tuition fee for each student going to the NFA.
Right.
Because the tuition for the NFA student has also been rising.
It has.
Yeah.
But we have more students that are going to other high schools other than just NFA. And having sat down and I spoke with Abby, a lot of the magnet schools, the regional
school,
high
yeah,
schools,
right.
You have a particular the science high school in New London is again one that students are electing to go to. You have the agricultural school. Oh boy, Ellen is just wonderful. Oh, let me see that again. Oh, that's fine. Okay. The agricultural school, high school in Ledyard is another one. Excellent schools, and students
yes.
are looking at that.
These are really services, again, that we need for the future. And unfortunately, if the city of Norwich is going to do all those cuttings, and at the same time, the state is already doing all the cutting themselves,
Right.
and where is the burden going to be falling down to? Well,
Hello.
it's not falling down onto the city of Norwich because it just kind of slipped right through. So now we don't see the homeless being, given at least some services because
You
if the
can give lip
state-
service, but it doesn't help somebody that's homeless or recovering from addictions
Or alcoholism and so on,
or
you know.
children that are still going hungry.
Right.
I mean, or the elderly that are trying desperately to stay in their
Yeah.
homes. None of these kinds of cuts help.
No, none of them will, but unfortunately, and again, I was saying to myself, maybe it's because I'm so biased in the health field that this should be the last program to be cut.
Right.
But unfortunately, it's the first program to be cut.
Yeah, it's one of the easiest.
And,
When you have 9,000 residents, which basically are the children within our community,
Right.
It's pretty easy to cut stuff for them because they're not going to speak up too loudly.
Yeah, I'm sure that if
it's
you
like-
cut the maintenance of the road and you see potholes over there, the governor's going to be getting an earful of phone calls almost like every day, like, why haven't you repaired those potholes? But if somebody cut off the program for, say,
Mental
children's-
health.
right?
I mean,
Nobody's going to be calling the governor
They
and
don't
say, hey,
call.
what about my,
Right.
my mine? And
that's right.
it's already scrambled.
Right. But some of the other places, because I came up with 1.4 million,
Yeah.
the other place that I recognized as much, again, this is not in any way, I'm not unappreciative or unsympathetic with the plight of our volunteer firefighters. However, with 5 fire departments, we have, and they're excellent. They do a good job. However, you have one that just goes up Laurel Hill, okay? And when you look at the cost and look at just without thinking that this is a political elite that is untouchable, it's one of those, you know, I'm talking about things that have raised everybody's hackles because these are supposedly politically untouchable. Well, nothing should be untouchable when you're talking about, if all you can think about is yourself and not the entire community, something's wrong. And I think then you have to legitimately just re-examine what's going on. Laurel Hill is easily covered by both the city.
I'm not going to step my bounds and try to micromanage.
I'm not either. I'm looking straight at.
I think we should have some kind of a study, and I'm sure that the council members are looking or maybe thinking about it. And you know, if they have the courage and the backbone, they will probably say, hey, you know, somebody mentioned that Laurel Hill Fire Department and so on only goes to so many
11 fires.
I mean, you know, maybe that was just a good year for them, and they were that.
But Ben, let me finish though, because it's more than the number of fires.
You need data. You need
exactly
evidence.
And when I didn't take anything that wasn't basically in the budget, okay, that's all I looked at. However, I also know that the Laurel Hill Fire Department, the majority of those volunteers don't live in Laurel Hill. So if you've got the Greenville Firehouse that's right over the bridge from Laurel Hill, and you've got the other city fire department that's over one other bridge from Laurel Hill, it doesn't make any sense that you're going to depend on people that don't even live in that neighborhood to fight those 11 fires. So that's one. Let me complete this. Then you can chop me up all you want. The other one was both Occam and Taffville are only 2 miles apart. Occam, I think that it's at least the councilmen are aware that it's real tough for Occam to respond to the fires, their fires. They had, according to the budget, they had 10 fires, but they had another 35 assorted. I don't know what assorted fires are, but again, with the other fire station, Taffville, again, a very active, a very healthy fire department, volunteer fire department. They could easily merge and cover that area without a problem. But by their basic budget was not the biggest part of what I was looking at, because that only came to like about 180, $145 maybe $1,000. But you had another $220,000 for all these different things within those fire departments that needed to be replaced. All kinds of major expenses for both of those fire departments. That to me does not make a lot of financial sense in a time when the city can't afford it. So those were only 2. I did have a couple others that I wanted to talk about, but the overall amount that would have been saved in the budget was basically $1.4 million. The whole Republican cuts came to 1.1 million or something. So you would have had at least another 300,000. The Republicans wanted to add another 114,000 for more paving, which I think is great. And then that still would have left over 220,000 that still could have gone to reducing the budget even more. And that was without cutting anything. So now you can go ahead, and I wasn't trying to micromanage how they do it. I was just trying to point out where things that they should be looking at.
All right.
Oh, that's it? I know if I talk long enough, you don't argue with me. What about the tall ships that came into New London? You're down there watching,
Yes,
right?
if you do have a chance to go down to the New London Pier, there's a Mexican tall ship that's beautiful, and you can see that it's one of the biggest one I've seen, and also one of the prettiest one.
Yeah.
And they're open during the daytime. You can actually come aboard, and at nighttime they have this light decorations, and it's just very nice to see something like this. And of course you can also talk to the sailors, and of course they only speak Spanish, but it is something worth seeing, because I don't think we'll ever see something like this
Are they
again.
coming up to Norwich?
No, no.
I wonder why.
No. They're leaving on Friday at 10 o'clock.
Oh.
And from what I understand, when they were coming in, you know, the sails were all being folded, and you see all the sailors, you know,
Sitting
standing on the beams of each mast, and it's a beautiful sight. And from what I understand, they were also coming in and doing a Mexican song and so on like that.
Oh,
so
wow.
it was a beautiful sight. So, unfortunately, the weather today hasn't been very good, or
I
over the
know.
last few days. And so I'd like to come and see it again, maybe tonight or even tomorrow during the daytime, and even tomorrow night, and see how
Isn't
it's
tomorrow Cinco de Mayo?
like. Yeah. So
Tomorrow?
Tomorrow is Cinco de Mayo. Okay.
Good way to
So-
celebrate that.
Right.
Okay. One other thing I wanted to mention was the lack of, well, there's a lot of things that we don't get in the news, but the Indiana primary was a victory for Senator Sanders
And also for Mr. Trump.
and Mr. Trump.
Yes.
Ted Cruz,
And as a matter of fact, I think that
Withdrew?
Donald Trump gave a knockout blow, punch to Ted Cruz.
Ted Cruz, so he is no longer in the race,
Right.
which basically means Donald Trump has the nomination.
Of course.
So, and he was discussed on the news. There was some news about Hillary, but not one mention about Bernie winning that primary, which is, to me, we're going back to the way it was with the news blackout on Senator Sanders, the first.
I
part
imagine
of
that
his
they'll probably
campaign.
think that he's no longer relevant, and therefore what they're probably looking at this is, well, what is it going to be like between Trump and Hillary?
Well, that's
Of
what
course-
they'd like you to believe,
Of
Ben,
course, they
but you
have
know
to print
that's not.
something that will sell newspapers. You get to understand that printed papers are now kind of difficult to maintain. It's not like clicking on your laptop and you see all the news. Man, you have to obviously go out there and buy a newspaper
Yep.
or
And
subscribe.
so, by the way, our number is on the screen right now, 860-889-1728. If you wanted to call and talk about the Norwich budget or anything else we're speaking about, please feel free to join the discussion.
Well, let me ask you this, since you're a Bernie Sanders supporter. How do you feel as far as Bernie, winning Indiana?
I'm really happy about it. It's again, he's going to be winning more than just Indiana from this point on, and I think that the biggest win obviously will come from California. Now, one of the polls showed that Hillary has to win 72% of the votes in these primaries in order to just have a sweep at the convention, and that's not going to happen. So I also, not just as a Bernie supporter, but as a Democrat, I know that I do not believe that she will beat Trump. There's people disagree with that, but I mean, you and I have seen how dirty he plays,
Yes.
and we know that there's enough.
You know how dirty she plays also. So,
Right,
I mean,
right. She
they
also
meant-
does,
are
but
meant for each other.
they're meant for each other. The problem is that would leave us with a Trump presidency, and for those Democrats that are talking to, Bernie supporters and saying you have to get on Hillary's bandwagon. That's fine to talk to, long-term Democrats. The problem is the Democrats that went out and voted for Bernie, a lot of them are just recent Democrats, and from what I've heard, they are not going to be voting for Hillary.
Well, the lesson to be learned about this whole thing is this: that the young men and women that are just coming out and are looking at their future and looking at their government, and they are now able to identify as to what's wrong with this picture. And so they said, well, for the first time, I'm going to be really, really active because I want to change for the future, and I am the future. And that is what they're saying. Whereas the older
like us,
people would just say, well, I'm really very comfortable the way things are. Yes, there might be some issues there, but hey, why change? Now, this is where the problem is going to be, because the young people may not get what they want. And, of course, they want free education, they want Medicare, health care for all, and all the services, which is good, because it is their future. Because right now, our system doesn't seem to be working well for the elderly. Elderly ends up going into the nursing home, or even working people, because all they have to do is one day have to go to the emergency room and get admitted to the hospital and have a major diagnosis and treatment, and they may think that they have a good health insurance. Well, what's going to happen is that when they get out of the hospital, they have to pay the copay, which is going to be very high. They lose their job because they can no longer work, and now they have no health insurance coverage.
Right. But you just made a point that I think even contradicts what you were saying, because you can't say that it's the young people that want, it's their future, and the older people are just saying, hey, everything's okay, let's not change anything, when in fact it's not okay. Because you just gave those examples of where it is not okay, but they don't seem to even vote in their own for their own benefit. They vote against what is in their best interest.
Like I said, a lot of times they fall into the pattern and habit of, I trust our leader and our system, and it's been working for me for a number of years, and it's going to keep on working. So why change it?
Because it's not working, Ben.
Well,
you can't live on...
When you boil a frog slowly, they won't realize that they're being...
burnt and cooked.
Cooked to death. So, hey...
And it's been a slow boil?
It's been a slow boil.
That could be. But one of the things, if I can kind of sneak into the TTIP and what's been happening with that, because it is relevant to the way people are feeling here.
Well, define it first.
Okay, the TTIP is the Transatlantic Trade Partnership. It is the largest trade partnership in the world. It is the United States with all of the European Union. And what has been happening, we've talked a lot about the TTIP, which is the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
It's a Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is an agreement or trade agreement between 12 nations
and
the United States.
And again, nations like some of the poorest nations in the world, where
our trading partner
are our trading partners, so that we can send more jobs over there.
Yeah.
What's happening in Europe is they have had and again, you don't see this on the news. I did have a video, but unfortunately, it's not in the right format to play. We're going to try to. At some point in the future, maybe have the video about this, but you've been having, or they've been having, the European Union in all of their countries have been having huge, massive protests. The one on the video that I was going to show you that just happened over the beginning of this week was in Germany. And they well over 250,000 people just marched on their Capitol or the Capitol building to protest the continued negotiations of the TTIP.
So it is really a form of a trade agreement, or it's like in the Survivor, it's an alliance.
It's an alliance.
Or favorable treatment among nations. And the question that I have is, who's behind this? I mean, we talked about the corporations, U.S. big corporations,
because they're the ones that are writing it.
Like Monsanto, of
Right.
course. And then a European government. And in return, the European government also will have their own big corporation that will supposedly be exclusively, just like any place else, are you a member?
Are you a member?
And but the thing is that who really is behind this? I mean, how come everything seems to have had some kind of already a kind of a roadmap towards eventually we're going to be friends? And all of a sudden, the people who didn't know anything about this, all of a sudden they knew about this. They got news that were leaked to them and saying, oh, gee, this is going to be so unfair to us. I mean, not to our government, but to us people.
To the people.
Right.
Right, because the entire trade agreement has been written by, as Ben said, corporations. Monsanto is a big player in this. Mercedes, pharmaceutical companies. To give you an example, to import, what is it, Mercedes that is manufactured in Germany?
Yes.
It's Mercedes? Okay, so they don't have to pay the tariffs to come into the United States. In exchange, all of Monsanto's products can now be shipped to the EU, and you don't have to label anything. That is actually, in the United States, what we talk about is the loss of jobs. We still haven't had any real protests, no real huge demonstrations about the TPP. But even before the TTIP is signed, you've been having these massive demonstrations in Spain, in France, in England, in Germany. The governments aren't listening, but the people are outraged. And the most important, the most unique thing about their protest is not about the products, not about the loss of jobs. They're concerned about the loss of democracy. I mean, think about that. We have countries in the European Union that are protesting because they recognize this is going to destroy their democracy. It's going to impinge on their legal systems. But what are we doing here in the United States, the bastion of democracy? We're the ones that are pushing the TTP and the TTIP. You've got to begin to question why you do not see anything about these trade agreements on national news.
Well, it's probably because we are the source of all these agreements. And I'm sure that, we may have seen this TTIP, which is trade agreement between us and the European Union nations, and said, well, how come they have all this information already? Well, I think what is happening is that people are getting smarter. When they realize that TTP is going to be signed already, and says, well, where did all these agreement came from? Where were they meeting? Well, they were meeting in the Philippines and
in
some
Hawaii,
hotel
in
New
Hawaii,
Zealand, and nobody knows until one day news media got hold of this, and of course I think there was also a leak coming from WikiLeaks. Is that right, Bonnie?
Right, WikiLeaks
that showed the agreement in details because nobody could find where to get a copy of the agreement.
The only people who had copies of the agreement were corporations.
Yes.
They were allowed in because they were writing them. Even our congressmen and senators could not, unless they went into a closed room by themselves without a notebook, without their cell phone, without anything, they could, I don't, somebody may have even been turning the pages for them, I don't know, but they could take no notes, and they could go in there and read certain sections.
So therefore, when this TTIP kind of surfaced, the newspaper in Germany were now at this time very, very well informed, and so they want to make sure that they are not left way, way, way behind like what we did with the TTIP. So they got themselves a copy of this TTIP agreement.
Greenpeace
right.
was the one that somehow managed to find someone to leak
Yeah.
parts of the agreement to them, and they have released it. It was the German
it's a German
members
yes.
of the Greenpeace movement.
And they said that it really is not going to be favorable to the citizens and the environment, because now we have this massive trade agreement without even input coming from the people or even the government. So
Well,
they can
the
burn...
government, for some reason, and again, our governments are all made up of people that are extremely wealthy.
Or works for the big corporation.
Or they've got guaranteed jobs by the big corporations. But when you look at where, just the Panama Papers, when more and more information comes out, it is the heads of governments.
Yeah, did you see my name there?
Haven't seen your name there, Ben. Nope. We have no hidden money anywhere, sorry. But they're the ones that will benefit from all of this. It's not, you know, I mean, I know one, the amounts of monies that are given to politicians is incredible. Like, I'm almost laughing at Hillary's $225,000 or $275,000 per speech fee, because that gets lost when you look at the one speaking fee that President Clinton got, $600,000 for one speaking fee to a Swedish electronics firm. One speaking fee, $600,000, while she's Secretary of State, to a Swedish electronics firm who was doing trade with Iran during the embargo, and for some reason the State Department was not going to pursue any interference in that trade. Now, you can keep going on and keep looking at all the monies that are collected by the heads of state through the Panama Papers, but the thing is, you do not get this news on your mainstream media. So what happens? When we were going door to door knocking during a primary campaign, and you just talk to people, you know they get their news from ABC, Fox News, NBC, CBS, and that's basically it.
That's traditional.
But that's not where any news... I mean, if you
media
want to
is
know about
changing.
Prince,
Yes.
you can find out anything you ever wanted to know about Prince. And I'm sorry that the man died, you know, but that should not be overshadowing the news that is impacting our daily lives, the lives of our children, the lives of our grandchildren, and most importantly, our own democracy. And that's what's happening. That's what is so upsetting.
Well, people are saying, you know, it's boring. So
it's boring? A revolution is boring? I'm sorry. If somebody just did one, just trying to, let me just say one thing,
they're
please.
more interested in knowing what
I know what the bra sizes of one of the Kardashians
Caitlyn
or something
is doing, or what dresses she's wearing,
or her shoes,
or the new car that she bought.
Yeah, that's not boring. That's terribly boring
exciting
to me.
for a lot of other people.
Well, okay, if that's exciting to them, I think that's fine, but that doesn't belong on the news. Just to give you an example, Ben, when I went to try to find some real news about actually the riots or the protests that were going on in Europe, because the article you sent me wasn't even from this was a German,
Yes.
SZ International,
Yeah.
the article that you forwarded to me, a German
Yes.
publication. When I went on, I did have a good video. This one is not going to be shown either, but the video was by news reporters, and the whole video really totally explained why these people were doing this protest. And again, it talked about the fact that they're identifying the threat to their democracy, not their loss of jobs. It's the threat to their democracy. But almost every one of those videos were from German television stations. They were all in German. I don't think our audience would have understood a single word that was being said. I did find one that came from the Real News Network. And again, they had the German reporter that was an American in Germany that was reporting this. And that's when it struck me, you know, how we really do not have freedom of the press. It's like we have the propaganda machine. When I was a young girl growing up in Norwich, you heard about the propaganda machine in the Soviet Union.
Or in China. That the news China is
it's all propaganda.
News from the government.
From the government, right.
Like a newsletter.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it was all propaganda.
Right.
And yet people are sitting back here, like your frogs,
Yes.
being boiled to death while they're being fed
Yeah. Some
garbage. The what?
BS. Some BS.
Some
from the
BS,
media.
yes.
Well, the fact is this, that in our society, of course, the government is not telling the news media that you better print this and not print that and so on. No, they're not doing that.
Partly.
They're kind of saying, well, if we are not happy with what you print,
You don't get any access to the White House
you
at
won't
all.
have any access whatsoever.
Right.
You will not have news whatsoever.
Right. You
So-
will not have access to us.
And it's true capitalism. That's how it works, buddy. Like,
Then
will
then
give
let's
you-
say let's just say we're a corporatology.
Yeah.
That we are not a democracy. I mean, let's just actually say it. You know, okay, this is not a democracy, this is an oligarchy. This is the plutocracy. You do not have a democracy.
but we are not socialist.
Oh, heaven forbid. We are not socialists. No, it's so much better to be an oligarchy.
Yeah.
You know, and that to me is when you're not concerned about the most vulnerable, and I'm not talking about the city of Norwich anymore, or even the state of Connecticut, I'm talking about our entire country. When you no longer care about the most vulnerable citizens in the country, when you don't care about what happens to your elderly, you don't care that we are, you know, and let me give you one example. Just this one, it's just about education. Because when I mentioned to someone that the TTIP have nothing over the TISA, which is a total service agreement. The bottom line of that trade agreement or that alliance is that anything that the government does that can be privatized must be privatized. When I said that to a Republican friend of mine, and I said, so just think, no public schools, he didn't even let me go on. As soon as I said no public, he said, so what? Our schools are crap. I have to send my kid to St. Patrick's. And I was so shocked by that attitude that I couldn't even speak at first. But do you realize how many people would not be able to send their kids to St. Pat's or to any other private school that they might want their child to go to? How many countries have you and I been to that do not have public education? And even when we were in Malawi, these kids, we had their parents pay. They have nothing, but they struggle just to get their kids.
And they had to pass an exam also in order to go to the higher grade. And then their future is determined by what the government needs. Like in this kid, he wants to be a farmer, but he cannot get into farmer in school because he doesn't have the money.
But within one generation, Ben, we would be a totally illiterate country, a basically illiterate country. Once they have most Americans making below $30,000 a year, because it is going to be a race to the bottom. So if you can expect to make $30,000 a year to raise a family, you will never be able to send your child to school. Without public education, we will be a totally illiterate country. And that's perfect. In a plutocracy, that is so perfect. Because then you can pick and choose who is actually going to get to go to Yale and Harvard and, Columbia and, who can have these educations and join the plutocracy. Because the rest of us will be the serfs that serve them. If we don't wake up soon, you think that this is an exaggeration? This is real life. This is not dull and boring stuff, folks. They've made science fiction movies about this stuff, and we've all gone to watch them. Unfortunately, this is not science fiction. No public schools, no public health. They're already trying to privatize our postal service that's in our Constitution. They're already militarizing our police. If you can think about Hollywood and those beautiful hills, they already have their own private fire departments. So okay, we privatize our fire departments and we pay them a fee instead of paying it in taxes. Well, we can't afford the fee. Well, okay, sorry, your house burned down, but the house next to you has insurance, so we're rushing out there and pouring water all over that house so it doesn't burn.
Everything that you just said, Bunny, actually exists. So welcome to the third world.
Oh, God, Ben. After that comes, Blackwater being our police department, and people are still sleeping. We have no legal system that protects us because it's overshadowed by the corporate law in the TPP. When people look and realize that Egypt was sued by a company in France for raising the minimum wage, they won. That company won. A country can't even raise its minimum wage for its own citizens. I'm telling you, how do you get people to really understand what's going on? Besides doing a song and dance, I'm not sure how to wake you up.
Well, I think what we ought to do is to send some few volunteers to see what it's like in the third world country. And
I'm willing to do that. I would do that.
Look at this. Of course, in Manila, there are gated communities. They have their own police force, they have their own fire trucks and everything.
I forgot about that. You're right.
And if there is a fire just next to that
gated community,
too bad. Well, too bad. The firemen will just be kind of looking at that big wall
and making sure that's totally wet down, so that the fire doesn't spread.
Get in.
I completely forgot about that.
Yeah.
It's
and politics there, of course, is just as bad as anywhere else. And at one time, I think you mentioned about something going on in our election system here, and there were a lot of accusations of frauds and vote tampering and so on.
And that video was extremely important. It's the one, unfortunately.
To me, right now, it's just a rumor because
it's not. But they're not a rumor.
And if this is really indeed true, then let's see them try these cases in court.
And finally, they have one that was supposed to go to court the beginning of this week. It's in Arizona. It has nothing to do with the most recent primary in Arizona. There's a different court case that is that's coming up about that probably won't be heard for another 10 years either. But this one was started in 2004, and it's finally getting to court. When you look at the evidence that these people have gathered to actually show what fraud has, how it works, what type of fraud, it is really frightening. It really shows you that if this was happening in any other country, as hypocritical as it sounds, we would have our congressmen standing up shouting about having fair elections in country X, you know, but they don't stand up and shout about having fair elections in the United States. That is really bothersome. We will not, there is not a live show next week because they are doing another round of something in the studio. So in lieu of that, I am going to try to make sure that the video that I did have with the proof, this was done by Registrar of Voters, and I'm not sure in which town, but they, or even which state, but they have machines that are very similar to ours. I will try to check with our Registrar of Voters to see if they are exactly the same. But it will show you exactly how easy it is for voter fraud to occur. And that's only the proof that I've actually seen videotaped with. You'll be shocked when you see it. But there is all kinds of voter fraud. Certainly voter suppression. We've seen it in this election. Down in Florida, you had almost 500,000 people who had been taken off the voter rolls because they were same name as an illegal alien.
Well, again, these are all rumors. Of course,
they're not.
The thing that they said about Brooklyn and that 125,000 voters were taken off the list. I mean, these are all, again, hey, somebody has evidence to that. Come on, let's.
They saw it, Ben. I mean,
and somebody was also telling about attempt to defraud the election in Rhode Island and so on. And again, you know,
I didn't hear about that.
Yeah, it's just, again, rumors.
But you know, part of what happens is just to be careful in Norwich. We wanted, I mean, I had absolute faith in our Registrar of Voters. I had not seen this video prior to the primary, but the one that I wanted to show tonight. But I never, ever, we've had the registrars on here. I think both women are absolutely honorable. They do their job. Being involved at that level in an election is tough because everybody's screaming at you all day long. However, we had a poll checker up there just because we wanted to just show everybody, look, we know that this is, there's no problems. That was actually our intent. They had one problem. Well, they probably had more, but the one that I got called on because a woman was very upset. She was she said she's been voting. She's been a Democrat since she was 18. Now she goes in because she wanted to vote. I have no idea who she was voting for. I do actually have a guess because when she saw my Bernie sticker on my car because I was made to leave the premises completely. She looked at me very strange, so I kind of knew she was a Hillary supporter, but I still wanted to help her. If she was a Democrat and wanted to vote, I felt she should have her vote counted. The vote is what was important. So we talked. She explained to me what happened, that she moved. That the Democrats even sent her this information about now that she moved, this is where her polling place is going to be. And she's always been a Democrat, never anything else. So I said, I'll check into it, but in the meantime, you might want to ask if you could do a provisional ballot until everything is satisfied. I did not know at that time that Connecticut does not do provisional ballots at all. They won't do it. But I walked back in with her to let her know who she should talk to. The moderator got, again, very upset with me and threw me out. I think she overreacted, but...
And maybe she
She's
knows who you
defensive.
are supporting, and she's supporting the other person.
That could be.
And so
But
she's just exerting her a kind of authority.
it could be. But, you know, either way, I
know.
can understand them being defensive because they don't know, you know. And when I went
Well,
down
but
to the...
that's no excuse for not being cautious or at least friendly. I mean, for somebody to just scream and yell at somebody to get out, you know, we see that, again, in third world, of course.
All right,
You
but-
intimidate the voters in such a way that they are not going to come and ask you questions. And there's no room for that.
All right,
That's
but
inexcusable.
let me tell you what happened, because I did go down to the registrar's office with this woman's problem, and they were great. They pulled out her voting record, I mean her registration, and her initial registration, she checked off, no, she didn't want to be affiliated with anybody. Her second one, when she had a change of address, again, checked it off that she did not want to be affiliated with anyone. If, you know, if it was a real easy thing to check, and then just to try to contact her again and let her know that nothing had happened at the polls, that really she probably didn't vote in a primary before. So,
Again, it's the responsibility of the moderator and help, but again, they kind of, their little power trip gets into their head.
well, I think
On
also,
that
Ben, they're feeling
particular-
intimidated.
In that particular day, that they will just scream at anybody. I see that a lot in the Philippines.
Yeah.
You know.
But I also think that a lot of it has to do with feeling, because they've heard all these same things. And when you think somebody is watching you, they can begin to feel intimidated, and I'm just leaving it at that. They're good Norwich citizens. They tried, but I do agree with you that, you know, it sometimes the
You
personality
could have explained it. I mean,
much
you know,
easier.
it's the same
That's
thing.
right.
I work at the VA, and I see a lot of them coming in, not knowing exactly what's going on, and they're scared, and they don't know how to use the computer, they don't know how to sign in.
And they get angry.
They didn't even know, you know, whether they should be in this clinic or the other clinic, because they have no idea. Now, how do you think that they will feel if all of a sudden we just tell them, get out of here, you're not in your list? We would have been all over the newspaper,
Right.
being told how discourteous we are and so on,
Right.
and unresponsive we are.
Right.
It's the same thing. We all work for the government, and we serve the people, and we serve our particular group, and it's our responsibility. Not only that, but it's our calling
Duty.
to be cautious, to help. And all I'm saying is that, yeah, you can have your day of power, and you can probably just use it, or you can just have your day of power and help other
And
people.
help, yeah. Well, we have run out of time. I do apologize for not having the videos that would have made some of what we talked about, both the TTIP and the voting machines, those stories a little bit more understandable, but hopefully we did a good job in explaining most of it to you. Again, we will not be live next week. I do want to thank Drew for being in our control booth, and Ellen, thank you so much for trying to get those videos for me this evening, but I'll be working on them for the next week, and hopefully next week we will have a tape show for you. So,
Good night.
good night.